Darkest Dungeon 2 is still slated for a 2021 fall release. The game is hitting early access, which means, most likely, a year plus of development is still to come. But what do we actually know about the game? Surprisingly, more than you think. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, one half of the team behind Legacy Gaming, and today we're diving in once again to talk about a ton of new information about Red Hook Studios' upcoming game, Darkest Dungeon 2. To start off, if you missed our first video on DD2, I definitely recommend you check that out. It was kind of a surprise hit for us, which made me realize there are a lot of people out there interested in what's going on with the second game. Reading through the comments, I first realized there's a lot of confusion, frustration, and downright apathy when it comes to the second game based on the limited information we knew at the time. I think Chris Bourassa, the creative director behind the game, picked up on this because he recently sat down with Game Informer to share a ton of new details about Darkest Dungeon 2. Truth be told, the first article by PC Gamer didn't do a good enough job introducing players to all of the changes coming to the game, but this second interview, alongside the new images that were released, really helped us get a sense of what this game is actually going to play like. The first thing I want to talk about is the gameplay loop, because honestly, I think this is where the biggest disconnect has been with the players and the developers. Now, I want to be crystal clear. I have not gone hands-on with DD2, but I've really taken all of these images and pieced together how things, I think, will play out. You may know this already, but instead of choosing a location and diving into a particular dungeon, we're actually going the opposite way, trying to escape a world that's falling apart. I want to start with this image here because it replaces the most iconic part of the first Darkest Dungeon game, the hallway crawl. This time around, we're in a caravan, and at each node, we'll move through in some fashion, encountering enemies, potentially meeting NPCs, and finding items. I think this will feel more akin to the classic Darkest Dungeon experience than initially thought. There's still a lot we don't know about this particular aspect of the game, but we can see multiple pathways and points of interest, which leads me to think that this will play out very similar to the original game, while still feeling completely new. I want to point out something really important, because I think there's been a lot of confusion about this one particular thing. DD2 is launching into early access, which of course means the game isn't complete, but that doesn't mean it won't be a full experience right out of the gate. From what I gather, Red Hook is taking the same approach that Motion Twin did with Dead Cells. The game will launch with a limited number of biomes, and over the course of early access, more will be added into the mix. This was incredibly effective for Dead Cells, which was one of the most popular indie games of 2017. By the official 1.0 launch of the game, the amount of content that was added because of the modularity of it all was incredible. Now, tying this back to Darkest Dungeon, the team has already said that each zone you travel through will be dominated by a different group or faction of enemies. You don't need to have all of those there at the start of early access because the design of the game on a macro level allows for simply adding new biomes, thus expanding the world. Speaking of the world, I want to talk about this picture here. It's probably the most important one we've seen up until this point. Now, if you played Curse of the Dead Gods, it might look familiar. It's a map, a chart of sorts that gives players options between nodes. If it plays out how I think it will, you'll make choices which path you want to travel down. I imagine we'll see combinations of combat areas, events, NPCs, things that will change your trajectory in a run greatly. I really enjoyed this system within Curse of the Dead Gods because it gave me the power to choose while still holding back complete control over my destiny. So to break it down in just a few sentences, you choose a path for your caravan to travel down. Along the way, you fight enemies, stop at key locations, meet NPCs, and I'm sure much more. When you reach the end of a node, you choose a new path. We also know that a more traditional dungeon plus boss combination is somewhere in each zone, but as we learned in the Game Informer article, you don't have to fight it to move on to the next major biome, but by skipping that fight, you run the risk of being underpowered for the final boss at the end of the run that you can't skip. I'm going to be really blunt. The PC Gamer article didn't do a lot to help Darkest Dungeon 2's image, and that's not necessarily their fault. Chris releases the information that he wants to release about the game. But now that we have a clearer picture of Darkest Dungeon 2, I'm getting incredibly excited about the potential because of this really robust and modular gameplay loop. There is, of course, still plenty we don't know and plenty left to break down, so let's circle back and talk about combat, another really hot topic on our previous video. Aesthetically, things look different. while still looking the same, and that's all fine. I'd rather focus on the systems that are changing. One of the biggest sticking points is a major change to RNG by removing accuracy. It doesn't exist in DD2, and a new token system has been implemented instead. Fundamentally, this changes everything. DD2 is going to play different because it's more of a combat puzzle than anything else. Some people are going to love this, others are going to hate it, but what it does is changes up the way abilities work in the game, specifically modifiers. We know that block tokens reduce the incoming attack by 50%, and dodge tokens allow you to completely avoid an incoming attack. But here again, we have yet another modular system that can be easily expanded as new enemies and new characters come into the game. When you boil it all down, that's honestly what I think Darkest Dungeon 2 is getting incredibly right. They're laying a strong foundation for expansion, and that's just not something they would have been able to do as a no-name company before the release of the original Darkest Dungeon. Now, with one game under their belts, and I would imagine substantial investment from Epic releasing as a platform exclusive, they have the resources, which also includes a bigger team, to plan out things long-term. We also see this in some new images from the Game Informer article highlighting the items in Darkest Dungeon 2. If you don't already know, the only thing you'll be collecting are trinkets, and it looks to be quite a library of things to pick up. The biggest new thing here is our first look at the vendors. In the bottom right, you'll see 3 different currencies, and while I'm not wild about the generic shapes representing things like gold or rubies, it's really about what you spend those on, the items themselves. You might notice that the numbers are way lower compared to Darkest Dungeon, where gold could climb into the hundreds of thousands, but I truly have no idea how the new currencies will play out. We have vendors, yes, but what about all the other things we used to spend gold on in the original game, like reducing stress and removing quirks? We did get a look at a mastery trainer screen, which looks to augment character abilities. Based on this end screen here, we know that the blue diamond represents mastery points gained along the way, so the smart money says that you can use those to augment abilities as you progress towards the final boss. We also know that the inn can play a big part in reducing a hero's stress, but can also tie into the new relationship system within the game. We didn't get a ton more information on that front, but we did see a more detailed character screen that shows how a character, in this case a highwayman, is viewed by his fellow companions. The colors also indicate that these could potentially tie into the quirks because they match. Still, so much more to learn about this system, and it's one of the things I'm hoping to talk to Chris Bourassa about during my interview with him in September. That's right, I'll be sitting down with the creative director behind Darkest Dungeon 2, so if you have any questions about the game you want me to ask him, leave us a comment down below and I'll do my best to bring it up during our discussion. In terms of other new things, well, you already know about the Runaway, the first new character coming to the game. And if you don't, we have a dedicated video on the channel talking about her, including a first look at some of her abilities, so give that video a watch. I'm latching on to as much Darkest Dungeon 2 information as I can as we head towards that targeted Q3 launch, so if you like Darkest Dungeon and you want to follow along with the game, which includes our full-blown coverage after launch, you know what you need to do. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe. It's going to be a huge fall for us here at Legacy Gaming, and we'd love for you to come along for the ride. We also invite you to join us on Discord. We've got a great community of around 7,000 members with a dedicated role just for Darkest Dungeon, so click the link in the description and join today. Finally, if you guys like everything we're doing here at Legacy Gaming and you want to help us out even more, you can now do so by becoming a member. For just a couple bucks, you're helping evolve the channel and take our community to that next level. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.